What's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well today. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that might be kind of sensitive, and I just want to say right off the bat, this video is not about politics. It's not a pro or anti for either side. Like, for me personally, in this video, it really has no effect in general. It basically comments on the exploding pagers, technical and OpSec related aspects. Hezbollah's use of pagers for secure communications was basically exploited, leading to large-scale coordinated attacks that resulted in thousands of injuries and multiple fatalities across Lebanon. And the alleged attackers are widely believed to be Israeli. And if it is, they demonstrated a pretty unprecedented level of electronic warfare by remotely detonating pagers used by Hezbollah members, exposing critical weakness in the group's operational security. And this attack marks a fairly interesting milestone in cyber warfare, showing how even seemingly outdated technology can absolutely be weaponized when proper precautions aren't actually taken. And in this video, I kind of wanted to examine the technical details behind the attack that we knew about regarding operational security failures that actually led up to it, and the lessons that are valuable enough for us to actually extract from this incident. So before we actually get into the technical stuff, though, let me just point out one thing from a OSINT perspective, right? Real-time social graphs. So in addition to the immediate physical impact of the pager explosions, which we'll get into in a minute, there's a pretty big intelligence angle to consider here. By targeting Hezbollah members through their communication devices, Israel has potentially created a wealth of data that extends beyond just casualties, with things like hospital admissions, injury reports, social media activity, and news coverage. Intelligence agencies can now pretty much cross-reference this information to build very detailed profiles of not only Hezbollah members, but also their friends, families, and associates. This attack basically allows Israel to collect enormous amounts of data in real time and allows them to map out the social networks and communications of affected individuals. Through OSINT, they can identify communications and movement patterns, mapping out key operatives, geographical distributions, and social connections. The result is an increasingly comprehensive social graph that includes familial relationships, business affiliations, and even locations of interest, things like homes, workplaces, and frequently visited areas. So for future operations, this data will absolutely provide Israel with a massive tactical advantage. They now have far more information about key players, where they're located and how they're connected. And this kind of intelligence goes beyond just identifying Hezbollah members, right? It extends to support networks that also exist. People who may not be directly involved in things like militant activities, but are critical in providing logistical support or cover, or the data generated in the aftermath of the attack will create a detailed and up-to-date social network map of Hezbollah presence in Lebanon and surrounding areas, which it's already doing, and that will likely aid any future operations or ground strategies that we see Israel actually implement. So the concept of wounding, overkilling in military operations has been strategically deployed to overburden an opponent's logistics and resources. For example, like injured soldiers require things like immediate evacuation, medical treatment, and long-term care, which definitely draws a significant amount of manpower and resources away from the actual battlefield. And this intent is to absolutely strain the opponent's infrastructure and reduce their combat effectiveness overall. This principle has applied in multiple military campaigns, from what I was actually able to find on Google anyways, from World War I to Vietnam, and even in contemporary conflict zones. And in this context, right, Israel's use of pager-triggered explosives targeting Hezbollah operatives could be viewed through this lens. The attack left over like 2,750 people injured, or many dead, but it's injured that we're actually talking about. These are the ones that are creating the enormous strain on the Lebanese medical infrastructure in general. Injured operatives require constant care, which pulls attention and resources away from Hezbollah operational capabilities. So it's also important to note that injured operatives and their care networks can lead to intelligence gathering opportunities like we were just talking about with OSINT. Those people who are doing things like visiting hospitals or seeking medical attention are very likely to actually be tracked, and that contributes to the larger effort overall. This tactic of overwhelming medical resources was pretty notably seen in previous conflicts like the Vietnam War, where the Viet Cong employed things like booby traps, not to kill, because that wasn't the goal, but it was to wound American soldiers. The idea being that each one of the wounded soldiers would require several others to actually assist them in just existing. And then this would reduce the number of combat-ready personnel. And similarly, in World War I, the use of things like gas attacks, for example, while deadly, obviously, was primarily aimed at actually incapacitating soldiers and causing long-term suffering and overloading field hospitals. And the suffering is a kind of a deterrent for the rest of the people that are still in combat. So moreover, evidence of this strategy is found in NATO's small arms and caliber decisions over the years. So, for instance, the 5.56 by 45 millimeter that is the NATO round is used by many Western militaries in general, and it's often criticized for things like its lack of stopping power compared to the larger calibers that exist. However, its design was partially influenced by the idea that wounding an enemy soldier could have much more of a psychological and logistical impact than just outright killing them. And this is especially true in prolonged conflicts. And the question really comes, like, does any of this sound like it would be useful in this kind of conflict, a conflict that's lasted a very long time? Hezbollah hearts pagers. So Hezbollah's decision to adopt pagers as a primary communication device pretty much stemmed from a legitimate concern over Israeli surveillance of cellular networks. And following a string of pretty successful airstrikes that targeted key Hezbollah leaders, the group basically made a shift to avoid using modern smartphones, which are susceptible to things like location tracking and signal interception and a whole bunch of other actually side channel attacks. But pagers operating on a radio frequency and functioning independently from cellular infrastructure were seen as a relatively secure alternative due to their relatively low digital fingerprint. This tactical choice was not unprecedented by any means. Pagers have actually been used historically by organizations seeking to avoid modern surveillance techniques precisely because they rely on simpler technology. And they don't leave the same kind of electronic trail or fingerprint, if you will, that we see cell phones leave. If you want proof of this, a great TV series to watch that HBO had forever ago was The Wire. Data technology may have created a false sense of security, and this is where an adversary can absolutely really take advantage. When someone feels safe, they put their guard down, they make it easier for the adversary to actually hit them. In addition to that, surprise attacks is also a form of a force multiplier. Put them together, and you have an absolutely devastating 1-2 combo. Explosives hidden in pagers. These details haven't been fully confirmed as of this recording, so just take it with a grain of salt. According to reports from Clash Reports and Sky News Arabia, Mossad is believed to have played a role in the pager explosions by planting PETN, a highly explosive material inside the pagers used by Hezbollah. The claim suggests that the explosives were attached to the pager batteries and the PETN was detonated by raising the temperature of the batteries, allegedly causing the material to explode. Disclaimer, I am not an explosives expert of any kind. I'm just a guy with a keyboard and access to Start Page, but I do know how to use Start Page. So PETN is a well-known stable compound, unlike more volatile explosives. It typically requires a shock or a detonator to actually trigger the explosion. Heat alone, such as what might come from overheated battery, it's likely that other components, like an electronic detonator, played a role. So at this point, there are still a ton of things that are not answered about how this attack has actually been carried out. But the small things that I noticed, I wanted to get on top of and kind of put it out there. So pagers operate on radio frequencies, and lack of encryption, meaning that messages transmitted over these networks are unprotected and vulnerable to things like interception. In contrast to smartphones, which use encrypted protocols such as AES or end-to-end encryption for things like messaging apps, pagers broadcast their data openly, making them a prime target for things like radio frequency manipulation. And the sheer scale and synchronization of the explosions in the Hezbollah attack suggests that an RF injection attack could have been the thing that was used. An RF injection allows an attacker to basically broadcast malicious commands over the same frequencies the pagers use for communication, and giving Hezbollah's use of a closed paging network a broadcast signal could have been timed to trigger the devices near simultaneously. And obviously, this has pretty devastating consequences. So at DEF CON 22, security researchers Patrick Wardle and Kobe Moore gave a talk titled Optical Surgery Implementing a Dropcam. In it, they basically showed how easy it was to hack and take control of a popular Wi-Fi camera system that was called Dropcam.
Frequency. And then when the microcontroller gets the frequency it's looking for, something amazing happens. If your camera starts blinking, get out of the way.
And this hack offers many insights into what might have actually happened with the Hezbollah papers. In their talk, they basically explained how they could install malicious implant into Dropcam software, and this allowed them to control the camera remotely, spying on the video and the audio, or even exchanging the video feed. And the way that they hacked Dropcam is kind of similar to the way that the pagers in Lebanon could have been compromised. In both cases, the devices could have been tampered with before they were even used. And this is called supply chain exploitation, which means basically messing with hardware or software during the manufacturing or delivering of the actual product, which makes it possible to control the device later on. And this is definitely the theory that I would go if I had to go with one. So the researchers also showed how Dropcam's lack of encryption made it easy to hijack. Encryption scrambles the data so that only the intended recipient can actually understand it, but Dropcam didn't use it in some areas, which opened the door for attackers. And this is similar to the kind of pager attacks that we saw, which also didn't have strong encryption or encryption at all, making it easy for attackers to send a signal and cause them to explode. The big takeaway here is that even older or low-tech devices like pagers can still be hacked. If they're not properly secured, anything can be. The Dropcam hack shows how even something as simple as a security camera basically can be turned into a spying tool, and in the case of Hezbollah pagers, outdated tech turned into a deadly weapon. This talk from Defcon 22 makes it clear that really no device is truly safe. If it can be tampered with or lacks basic security protections like encryption, attackers today have the tools to hack just about anything if given the time and opportunity. And in addition to that, one of the things you'll see at the end of the video is they make the camera, when it sees someone, explode. One of the most plausible explanations for how this attack was actually carried out, and the one that I would end up putting money on, is absolutely the supply chain vulnerabilities. Supply chain attacks occur when hardware is compromised during the production or distribution. Devices can be fitted with malware or backdoors that allow remote access or activation at a later stage. In this case, it's possible that the pagers used by Hezbollah had actually been tampered with, and that during the manufacturing or distribution, they were actually tainted at that point and had backdoors added to them. In this case, probably explosives. And this could have allowed attackers to do things like implement a kill switch mechanism that could be triggered via an external RF signal. Israel, with its vast experience in electronics and warfare, would have the technical capability all day to carry that out. And such a sophisticated attack and the closed nature of Hezbollah's communication network, it wouldn't protect them from an exploit embedded in the device itself. So one of the famous examples that I actually found was an example of a hardware vulnerability leading to potential physical harm that was actually discovered by a guy named Charlie Miller, who was a security researcher in 2011. And during his research, Miller found that the microcontrollers that were embedded in Apple laptop batteries could be hacked, allowing attackers to manipulate their charging systems. And this vulnerability lies in the smart battery system, which monitors battery properties like voltage and temperature. By reprogramming the battery's firmware, Miller was able to demonstrate that it could cause the battery to overcharge, potentially leading to things like fires or explosions. He acknowledged that lithium-ion batteries are actually known for their volatility under the right conditions, though. Miller explained that the real risk actually comes from altering the firmware so that the battery reports incorrect voltage levels, tricking the system into overcharging it. While the safeguards, such as fuses, do exist to prevent catastrophic failures, these defenses can occasionally fail, which leads to very dangerous outcomes like bricked batteries or, in some cases, exploding batteries. As he noted, it's possible that futzing with the parameters could cause the battery to fail at best or explode at worst. This attack demonstrates how even seemingly minor components like battery controllers can become entry points for potential destructive exploits. Miller's discovery is particularly concerning because persistent malware could be installed in the battery's firmware, remaining even if the computer's operating system was completely wiped. And this would allow attackers to reload the malware even after a full system reset. The vulnerability was actually tracked back to Apple's use of default passwords for battery controllers, which had been left unchanged from publicly available documentation. And this oversight really showed how a simple security misstep can absolutely expose critical hardware systems to serious risk. While pagers are simpler devices than laptops, obviously, the concept absolutely remains the same. If a backdoor or vulnerability exists within the pager's hardware, an attacker could trigger it remotely to cause physical damage, whether through overheating batteries, short-circuiting, or other means of introducing a malfunction. And this theory aligns pretty well, right, with this is simultaneous detonation of pagers across multiple locations in Lebanon. However, I not batteries exploding. I still think that there was absolutely some kind of supply chain attack here where there was some kind of explosives that were set in. It's really the only thing that makes sense for such a coordinated thing where every pager explodes at the same time. I just don't see that happening with any kind of batteries that can actually be put in. And the tactical use of RF attacks that we talked about before, they have long been a tool in electronic warfare arsenals. RF signals can disrupt communications, manipulate devices, or even do things like inject malicious commands into unprotected systems. Given that pagers rely heavily on RF communication, an attack of this kind of nature would be well within the capabilities of an advanced, technologically advanced intelligence agency. The pagers Hezbollah used operate within a specific frequency band, as many pagers do, and with enough surveillance and intelligence gathering, attackers could identify and extract frequencies being used. Once those frequencies were identified, a powerful RF broadcast could be sent, overriding normal communications and absolutely triggering malicious commands. The fact that the attack actually affected thousands of devices simultaneously across multiple regions suggests that this was absolutely a coordinated RF injection targeting a closed system that Hezbollah thought was secure. The OpSec failures. Initially seen as an intelligent OpSec move, Hezbollah's reliance on outdated technology proved to be a pretty critical weakness. Although pagers are harder to track than smartphones, typically, their lack of encryption and simplicity of technology made them vulnerable to exploitation in ways that Hezbollah may not have anticipated, essentially meaning that they had absolutely no threat modeling that they actually did. And now we can see the fruits of that. And from an operational security perspective, this incident definitely tells us a few really, really big lessons. For one, no technology is inherently secure. Even devices that are thought to be off the grid can absolutely be exploited if an attacker has the resource and knowledge to actually target them. I remember like 10 years ago when people would talk about burner phones, and I just laugh, knowing full well that they obviously had not looked into any of the information that Snowden or countless other whistleblowers had actually leaked before that. It was a dead giveaway. 2, supply chain security is absolutely critical. If the pages were compromised during the production or the distribution, Hezbollah's OpSec strategy failed before the devices were even deployed to begin with. Organizations relying on technology for secure communications really have to ensure the integrity of their hardware supply chain. It tells me that along with what we had pointed out before of them not actually having any threat modeling actually done, it also shows that they simply imported them and did absolutely no kind of security checks whatsoever on them. And while that might be okay for me and you, for example, buying a new phone, it definitely should not be okay for anyone with serious adversaries. 3, encryption should never be overlooked. Modern encryption protocols protect against interception and manipulation the vast majority of the time, and even low-tech devices can benefit from just basic encryption to prevent malicious exploitation. So what's the point of all this? Today's video should give you more than a few lessons in operational security and strategic planning that can be applied in both everyday life and high-stakes environments. And one of the biggest key takeaways is the importance of building a threat model tailored to your specific situation. Whether you're in an organization or an individual or identifying potential vulnerabilities or understanding how you can be targeted is absolutely essential. And just like Hezbollah's reliance on outdated pagers made them vulnerable to exploitation, relying on old or unsecured technologies can expose anyone to unexpected threats. Another key lesson is the need for constant adaptation. Technologies and tactics evolve rapidly, and staying ahead means regularly updating your kind of toolkit, communications and strategies. Whether it's a business environment or personal OpSec, the mindset of if it isn't broken, don't fix it can lead to complacency, leading to vulnerabilities and proactivity, like securing your information and devices through encryption and secure communication platforms and things like strong passwords is absolutely critical, and actually maintaining control over your security. Even indirect association can reveal a lot about you. Regular auditing of your communications and connections and shared data really helps to mitigate the risks of being exposed to unwanted observation. Just like Israel likely gathered a social graph from the aftermath of this attack, understanding what information trails that you actually leave behind can actually help you control how much of your personal info is actually exposed. Finally, always plan for contingencies. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.